Moved to Nova Scotia, they said. It'll be fun, they said. Okay, nobody actually said that, but my misguided friends on Vancouver Island are still hoping for snow. Insanity, I tell you. Well, there are reasons why housing in Victoria is not affordable. It's just too nice. Anyway, let's talk about something more fun. Sword fighting. So this, like any skill, is difficult to learn, or maybe I should say difficult to master in particular. And it, of course, depends on the individual. I've had a number of opportunities to teach beginners at Blood and Iron Victoria, and everybody is a little bit different depending on their background, prior experiences, and their anatomy, their mindset, etc. Some people take a bit longer to learn the same thing, whereas others pick it up more quickly. And then with a different kind of technique, they may struggle more than the other person, vice versa. By the way, don't be discouraged if you hear that it's difficult to learn HEMA, or any martial art, really. Maybe I should say challenging rather than difficult. That would be a more positive way to put it. Because, even if it may be tricky, you'll get it eventually, and it'll be very satisfying once you've learned it, and then when you keep honing your skills. And it's a great thing to do. It's just for the community. That aspect is great, getting to meet people with similar interests and all that. And the practice, it's good to get in shape. It's good to master a skill, or keep walking the path toward mastery. You'll never complete it, but you know what I mean. There are certain recurring issues, let's put it that way, like footwork, for example. A lot of beginners find it difficult to get into because it's very different from how you walk and move in everyday life. Throughout most of history, we had to walk a whole lot, so you don't want to spend that much energy on it. Whereas fighting, sure, energy conservation is also important, but you just can't get away with that. The basic stance, for example, is much wider and deeper, and a lot of beginners have trouble getting this low, because this puts quite a bit of strain on the quads and hamstrings, and they may not be trained. So it may be difficult to maintain that position for long, or maybe they have flexibility issues and can't quite get that low without bending forward or things like that. So that in and of itself is tricky, and then they have to relearn things, even things as simple as a step forward. You think, oh, I know how to step forward. It's not quite the same. What a lot of beginners do is over-rotate. So they step all the way over here, and they basically turn their core to face kind of perpendicular to the opponent, which makes it difficult to defend against counters and to do follow-up cuts. Like, if I do this, and now I have to rotate back over here. Oh, this is fun on slippery ground. Whereas if I keep my hips more forward, I don't have that issue. There are a lot of challenging parts of footwork. Things like advancing and retreating steps, for example, where you push off with the rear leg, and then the rear foot follows after the front foot. That can be tricky to learn in the beginning, and things like the gathering step as well, for example, where you bring your feet together without bobbing up and down with the head too much, also staying on the balls of your feet. I still struggle with that sometimes. This is something you have to practice over and over and over again. If you compare this, heel first and then ball of the foot, is not quite as flexible in terms of quick directional changes as it is to be on the balls of your feet. You have that in a lot of other martial arts as well, where you stay on the balls of your feet, boxing, for example, because it's a more agile, more mobile platform. Then of course you have specific techniques which can be difficult to learn, because first off you have to understand the pattern. That takes a while. Simply watching somebody demonstrate it. I found some people learn better if they see something from the front, others see better or learn better if they see it from behind, which is the way they would be facing. So things like the thwart cut, for example, is pretty tricky. Like you have to get the thumb engagement right, and you have to make sure that you really pull with your offhand, in my case left hand since I'm right-handed, as opposed to trying to do it with the main hand. There's a lot of little details there. And then of course you have complex techniques. You know, you do this thing to provoke that response from your opponent, and then you attack that opening. If they defend that, then you change to this opening, you know, combinations and things like that. That's where it can get complicated, and then you have to not only remember it, but you have to execute it correctly, and you have to keep practicing over and over again. Of course, practice makes, well, permanent, as they say at Blood and Iron, not perfect, because it depends on the quality of your training. If you train for 30 years and you're doing it all wrong, you're not going to be perfect. You're just going to have a whole bunch of bad habits, basically. And of course, it's use it or lose it. I've gotten a little rusty since I haven't had as many opportunities for training lately, and I still don't have a training partner here in Nova Scotia. If you are around in the area, near Halifax, Sackville, Mount Uniacke, etc., let me know. Finally, let me just talk about what I find probably the most difficult, or at least a constant challenge, one of the many, is keeping movements tight. Now, this is not always strictly necessary. If you're fighting with a montante, for example, there are going to be a lot of wide swings because you have to use your reach and you have to keep the momentum going and all of that. Polish saber also wouldn't apply quite as much. But with a longsword, it pays off to keep the movements pretty tight. What I mean by that is, compare these. In one case, there's some telegraphing going on. You can see that something is coming. Then you have much less unnecessary movement. So it's just the technique itself, without any wind-up, without any more follow-through than you need, basically with a fluff cutout, if you will. So as I said, this doesn't always apply. Sometimes you want the larger movements because they're simply more powerful. If you think, for example, if I cut all the way from Wrathguard, this is going to be a much more powerful cut than if I'm here in Roof Guard and just come forward like this. This, of course, with proper core engagement, this can still be quite a powerful cut, but it can compare to cutting all the way from Wrath. With Roof Guard, it also depends on the interpretation. From here, it's going to be more powerful than from here. Another example, parry, low cut parry. This is not a proper cut, not enough rotation to cause significant damage. This takes longer, but it is a proper cut. So by eliminating any extra movements, you're going to be faster, of course, and it's going to be harder to see what you're about to do. And this, by the way, is one of the reasons why fantasy fighting is often not very realistic, because this is exactly the opposite of what you want to achieve for the audience. The audience needs some help seeing what's going on. So that's why you have anticipatory movements, so they understand what's about to happen. That's exactly what you don't want. You don't want to telegraph, well, unless you have some devious plans, unless you want to cause a certain response and then follow up with something else. There's usually a bit of a gap between how you know you should be executing a technique and how it ends up being in sparring. Because, well, you have a lot to worry about in a specific situation. A lot happens at once. It happens very quickly, and you have to adjust in a fraction of a second to what the opponent is doing, etc. So it ends up being not quite as clean, which is a matter of practice and experience. The longer you've practiced and the better you're training, the more experienced you are, the cleaner your sparring is going to look, of course. There are a lot of advanced techniques that really only the highest ranks can pull off, the most experienced people, and can make look good. But even somebody who has a lot of experience and has trained very well, if they record themselves and watch the sparring video, they will still find a lot of things where they're like, oh damn, why did I do this and I shouldn't do that, and etc., etc. So it's a constant process. It's a never-ending journey. Basically, the more biomechanically efficient you can be, the harder you are for your opponent to deal with. And yeah, that's part of the many things that go into sword fighting. And that's only what I can tell you with my experience. I would consider myself kind of intermediate at this point. There are people way beyond what I can do, especially right now, because I'm, as said, a little rusty at this point. Anyway, I hope you found this informative. Maybe you learned a thing or two about HEMA, historical European martial arts, or other martial arts for that matter, because a lot of the fundamental basics apply across the board. And if you like the video, maybe you want to support me on Patreon, link down below. I'll be putting up a Patreon exclusive outtake compilation soon, by the way, which is going to be a bunch of me stumbling over my own words and video lights falling over and things like that. It's pretty fun. I decided to make it a Patreon exclusive because there's a lot of swearing in it, to the point where YouTube would probably not approve. In fact, definitely wouldn't. F you. Such a scatterbrained piece of shit. All right, thanks for watching and have a good one, folks. And now get out of here before I, you know what.